Dyany?
Good morning. My name is Dyany Munson. Have been working with Empower Idaho on and off for a few years now. I train a certified peer support specialist certification. Um, there's going to be a link towards the end if you know anybody that's interested in future in becoming a peer support specialist. And I've been working in the field as well for about 9 years. I currently work with Access Behavioral Health doing peer support and running peer support groups. I hope you really enjoy this today, and I hope you get a lot out of it that's going to help you maintain your own recovery and just feel really solid in the work that we do. Um, um, I will let you know that we open this up to all peer related services, but we are focusing on the peer support, the CPSS code of ethics. I looked at the others, and everybody else is really long, and we don't have time to cover all of everything. But we're going to cover stuff that hopefully is mostly universal. Um, so the objectives of this course, or we're going to define common terminology, which hopefully we've already done somewhat for you, and learn how healthy boundaries are the core of ethical and professional conduct. It's really just the core of a lot of what we do. And we're going to learn some tips and tricks to help the peer support workforce better understand and implement boundaries with peers and in the workplace. And as Mary noted, I do like the Q&A. One of the things I'm open about is that I have ADHD, and even with medication and tips and tricks, one of the tips and tricks and tools that I use is channeling stuff to a more manageable stuff, because otherwise if I'm in the chat, I can't do that and teach at the same time, unfortunately. But feel free if you have a specific scenario or question about boundaries as we get going, you can put that in the Q&A as well. The purpose of boundaries in peer services is pretty much threefold. One of the things we hear a lot about use boundaries, healthy boundaries, but sometimes it's difficult to understand that it's not just about cutting people off, it's not just about saying no, and it has a lot more benefits than just our preservation. Um, for instance, under self care, we have a better work life balance if we set and enforce boundaries well. It protects us from responsibilities that are not ours. It protects us from burnout, and it maintains and builds our recovery. Which, if you've looked at our code of ethics, there's two items in the CPSS code of ethics that specifically require us to maintain and further our own recovery. Number 1 and number 5, in case you are looking. And then when it comes to peer growth, this is another set of benefits. When we have good set and enforce boundaries well in peer services, peer growth, it's more strength based for the peers. It's focused on what they can do instead of swooping in and trying to clean up. Oh, they're having trouble with what they can't do. Well, no, we're focusing on what they can do and we're setting good boundaries. It allows the peer to build their skills, confidence, and responsibility, which are all necessary to move forward in their recovery. It encourages finding of appropriate resources instead of relying on one person that might be yes. It empowers individuals to make positive changes in their lives. And having that power is huge when it comes to moving into recovery. Just recognizing, oh, I can do stuff? Wow, that's amazing. Um, uh, and when it comes to ethics, it better supports confidentiality when we set and enforce good boundaries. It supports the peer supporters recovery. That's ours because that's part of recovery. It keeps us in our lane with the scopes that we have to cover there. And it reduces legal liability and increases ethical compliance. Good boundaries are good for us all the way around. Um, then when it comes to types of boundaries, this is something that we picked up from positivepsychology.com. But this is something we'll notice. Some of these are like very, very obvious, like Physical boundaries. Don't touch me. That's okay. We're going to keep that physical boundary there, but which can also include like space around us as well. Conversational boundaries, what we're going to talk about. Internal boundaries, which is something I'll talk about later, is boundaries we set for ourselves. Material boundaries, where I'm not going to lend you money. I have a boundary. I don't lend family money. If I have money and they need it, I might give them money, but I won't lend it because that causes problems. Emotional boundaries, how emotionally available you are to others. Sometimes we feel a sense of obligation that I need to do this and I need to do that, and then we put ourselves in a bad place, and then we're not able to help as well as we wanted to. Mental boundaries, the freedom to have your own thoughts and values and opinions, which it goes both ways when we set good boundaries. And then time is obvious. I'm going to end the appointment on time. Um, so these are some types of boundaries that we might utilize as we move forward and we work to build those skills. Um, then we get into something that I developed that we call levels of boundaries. And I put it in a grid like this because I find that to be really helpful. Internal boundaries are boundaries you set and keep for yourself regarding your own feelings and actions for or about yourself. External boundaries are those you set for and enforce regarding the actions of others and our feelings about others. They're about other people. And we want to remember these because we're going to use them in the coming slides. But I'll give you a couple of examples here. An internal I want to say emotional boundaries are about our feelings, and physical boundaries about things we do. So internal emotional boundaries might be I'm trying something new, and I am going to set an internal emotional boundary that I'm going to work to not be mad at myself or upset with myself when I don't succeed at it right away. I don't know if any of you ever feel that way. I'm trying something new. Maybe it's like we get this perception that everybody can do this and I'm really slow. And so, oh, I tried it once and I can't do it. And, that's not necessarily a healthy way to approach stuff. That's an internal emotional boundary. Okay, I struggle with that. And so I'm going to practice setting this boundary with myself and not saying those nasty things to myself when I mess up. An internal physical boundary is stuff that we do for ourselves. And that could look like I have things to do tomorrow and it's making me a little bit anxious, which is making me do what is sometimes called revenge procrastination bedtime. And in which case, I will suddenly find it very compelling to watch 6 episodes of some show because I'm anxious about the next day, in which case I have to set a physical boundary with myself. I'm only allowed to watch 2 episodes and then I have to turn it off so I don't stay up all night and hurt myself tomorrow. Does that make sense? So we set those physical boundaries with ourselves, and sometimes it's things that we do. I am going to go and shower at this time. I am going to do this, that, and the other. And so sometimes these things that we do or don't do for ourselves are also those kind of boundaries. Then, when it comes to external emotional boundaries, the biggest thing I see and feel in peer support is I'm not going to feel responsible for the consequences of somebody else's choices. For instance, my peers' choices. I'm not going to feel responsible for that. A lot of times we come in and we instantly start feeling a sense of responsibility for the people that we work with. And that will hurt both them and us because then we're going to feel bad for things that we cannot control and we might try to start to control them. And that's their choices. And we can't, and that's going to hurt us, right? Then when it comes to external physical boundaries or things we do regarding other people, and I'm going to set a boundary and not swoop in and try to fix this. I'm going to set a boundary and I'm not going to make suggestions. I'm going to set a boundary and I'm not going to lend them money, for instance. And when it comes to the things that my peer does, and sometimes you'll see these work together. An external emotional boundary, I'm not going to feel responsible for my peer getting around. So if they call me outside of hours or outside of an appointment time, say, can I get a ride? I'm going to set that external physical boundary of I'm going to say no. I can say it in with tact and nicely, but I am not going to feel obligated to do that, and I'm not going to do that. And that makes sense? So we got the internal, external, emotional, and physical. And those are really handy. And if you're on a computer, you can hit the print screen button on your keyboard and it'll screenshot that this screen if you want to utilize it in the future.
Dyany, I
Yeah.
did put a link to the boundary level and type handout in the chat. And so people can just go ahead and click on that link and bring it up. So it's a cheat sheet to refer back to during the scenarios.
Excellent. I just saw somebody bring their phone up earlier to take a picture of a screen. I assume that's what they were doing, and so I was given that as an option. Um, so so then we're going to break down the certified peer support specialist code of ethics in terms of boundaries. We're going to, and as I said before, we're going to be focusing on this one for the presentation, but enough of this applies. It's the shortest code of ethics out of all the peer services, but so a lot of it covers a lot of the core things. So hopefully you'll all be able to take what you've learned today and apply it to the differences in any other code of ethics that may be covered. And we're not going to we're not going to go over every single item, but I'm going to present a scenario for each thing that we do cover, which a lot of scenarios may cover more than one thing. And then we'll discuss how boundaries can best be used or misused in the situation, how that ties to the ethical compliance and what types of boundaries, internal, extra. So that's I'm like, how many? I only see these as I present them, any typos that I do. But what levels of boundaries would help most, and how one type of boundary might affect another. And so you were sent a link, and so I hope everybody has a copy of the code of ethics. We can't see because it's all blurry because I did a blur. But have that ready to be because I'm not going to have it up as we go through the scenarios. So we're going to go. So, certified peer support specialist Tim has a good rapport with his peer John. John doesn't have a lot of natural support, so Tim sometimes gives John rides outside of their session times when John seems desperate. And they sometimes have long conversations that are occasionally about some of Tim's struggles. So, the questions I'm going to ask, and I'm going to invite you guys to participate in the Q&A as part of Zoom. First is, which code of ethics are being violated in this scenario? And I'm going to just say it's obvious ones. We're not necessarily looking for what could be happening. I want to just get the obvious ones. Giving rights. Okay, which code of ethics is being violated by giving rights?
Yeah.
Dual relationship. Yep, number 10, dual relationship. Absolutely. When you now giving rides in within sessions is not necessarily bad if it's in the course of supporting them in their recovery goals, not just to give them rides, right? But if we do give them rides, especially outside of sessions, it is absolutely a dual relationship. We are now their peer support and their taxi service, and that's a big fat no-no. Correct, correct. What else do we got here? Anything? Anyone? Bueller?
Give me a minute to get up my keyboard.
Okay, so if you are having trouble with the Q&A, go to in the toolbar of Zoom. There is like more, and the Q&A will uh, pop up that way. And yeah, we have dual relationships. We've gone over that. Um, what else do we have? Tim sharing his struggles. Excellent. Now, what code of ethics is kind of being fudged right there with him sharing his struggles in their conversations? We're supposed to share our lived experience, but we share our recovery stories, correct? So, yeah, so sharing his struggles, he's not a clinical role. And he's not acting in a clinical role with anything we see here. He's not trying to help process or anything, but he is when he's sharing his personal struggles, he's not really sharing his recovery story. And yes, we want to work to minimize the power differential. That's important. But when we start slipping in our role to to like vent or complain or work through things, then we're not in our role. We're slipping outside of our lane, and in some ways, that's a dual relationship as well. Um, uh, Scope of practice, it is not exactly scope of practice because he's not really slipping into any other role. He's not slipping into, for instance, case management, CBRS, or clinical, but he is slipping into a friend role, which is more of a dual relationship there. Um, and he is breaking boundaries. That's nothing specifically in the code of ethics, but he is breaking boundaries, and by that, he is not helping with the code of ethics here. The biggest thing we see here is the dual relationship, which is code of ethics number 10. And as I my mouse slips. So what damage, and this could be damage to either party, is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario, and to whom and how? And know that this was not a violation of confidentiality. Sandra, I assume by both you mean damage is possible to both parties, and I would say correct. And I would also, I need to know what sorts of damage is possible. Have you guys ever found yourselves in situations like this? Liabilities during car rides, Mikhail. Excellent. That's a very good point because we already have some extra insurance burden sometimes when we are um, connecting our peers to things during services. To do so outside of services is going to make us liable on a different way that can make our agencies very upset with us. And we don't want to do that. So, absolutely, that's a possibility there. When you share your own problems with your peer, it often invokes their empathy for you, which isn't helpful to them. Them having empathy is not harmful to them, and that can be very, very good for them. And so that's not a problem to them, but it may make them feel responsible for you, and that will not be a good. That isn't necessarily very good for you them in that way. So empathy, not a problem. Sense of responsibility, yes. So very close on them. It is when we share our own problems with them, it does cause problems. Absolutely. What else we got?
Dyany, Karina can't use the Q&A, so she put it in the chat. She said dual relationship, but also there is the issue of allowing others to manipulate you.
And that is a possibility, especially if our maladaptive coping skills. Something very, very common in helper roles, such as all the providers, including pretty much everybody that I've ever trained out of the hundreds of people I've trained with to be peer support. is that we want to help. We feel it necessary to help. We need to help people. And so you're right, it absolutely can be a problem with our not maintaining our own recovery. We're doing too much, and us enabling them to not recover as well. And Anastasia put that up as well, enabling the client. Absolutely, they're becoming dependent on us. They're not finding their own resources. They're not building their skills and tools and resources to be more independent and move forward in recovery because they can lean on us, right? And that's not what we're there for. We are there to support them as they move into recovery, not to swoop in and save them. Not encouraging client to expand his personal resources. Absolutely, Miranda. Shane says not promoting self advocacy. Absolutely. That's one of the tools that is so vital for recovery. It can cause the peer not to self advocate and depend on us to help them. Absolutely. Setting incorrect expectations when working with peers and other providers. Absolutely. One of the terms I invented a few years ago is a bad boundary Betty or a bad boundary Bob. And sometimes peer workers can be this, and sometimes other workers, and then other workers have expectations set on them that are not helpful, that can really be a stumbling block to a peer trying to move forward in the recovery. um, uh, Sandra says, please repeat how company can be violation. I'm not sure what you are referring to, except for possibly when I was talking about the company being upset with you with the liability, because the companies a lot of times are backup liability for anything that can happen with a peer. So yes, you have insurance for your car when you connect them during appointments and such, and then and the agencies that we work with have insurance and bonding to help protect things that can go wrong. And if you're working with a peer outside of peer sessions, that adds extra liability that they haven't signed up for, that the agency hasn't signed up for. Does that make sense? So the company's not in violation, but they're going to be upset. Um, uh, Somebody says accurate documentation. We don't see anything on documentation here. This isn't an official session, so there will be no documentation expectations. So it's not, but sometimes that can make documentation weird because, oh, I spent this extra time with the peer that I shouldn't have spent with them. Do I document that or not? No, but now it's all messy. Not empowering client and possible trauma from sharing peer support. I think trauma can be unlikely. Well, trauma can't happen. Secondary trauma possibly, depending on how severe Tim's problems are that he's sharing. Um, but yeah, we need to be more strategic in our sharing than to just dump on the peer. Peer support is reciprocal, but there's still we still stay in our role, and our role is not receiving services. Our role is to give services in this case. That you guys are doing great with this. I think it just takes a little bit for us to get going uh, um, forward. So yes, Tim sharing his struggles is a problem. I hit the button that scrolled me all over the place. Might be some codependency happening. So just so we're all clear, codependency is where a person feels like they need to help. They are dependent on serving others. Does that make sense? So codependency isn't being dependent on being helped. Codependency is a person's choice that they need to help other people, which is pretty common in helper roles. So there may be some codependency. I really need to help him. Oh man, I'm going to feel like I'm my life is not complete unless I rescue my peer from every possible struggle. And that is a problem that will absolutely hurt you in peer support, 100%. Um, so then what levels, such as internal, external, physical, or emotional, of boundaries would help Tim to avoid the ethical violations we see here? So for this first one, I'll give you guys some examples. When it comes to internal boundaries, what Tim can say, remind himself is, I am not the only person in my peer's life, and I am not responsible for him getting places. So I am not going to feel bad about saying no. That's an internal boundary, something he does with himself, because those feelings of responsibility that's actually not his, that's an internal problem. That's a Tim problem. That makes sense. So that's an internal boundary. When it comes to the external emotional boundaries, is I so that there's an external emotional boundary there, as well as I am not going to feel responsible for things outside of my role with this peer. I am not their friend. I am not their taxi. I am not that resource, and I am going to let go of that. I'm not going to feel responsible for this in my peer's life, and I'm not responsible for this peer uh, not not practicing self advocacy yet, being scared to self advocate. Because is that Tim's fault? Absolutely not. Is Tim the only person in that peer's life? No. That's something we sometimes think of. How is this going to work out? They're coming to me desperate. How is this going to be solved? It it may not be solved this time, but it definitely won't be solved long term if we have poor boundaries. Because then the peer doesn't need to. They don't need to learn to self advocate. They don't need to build up courage. They don't need to build up skills, because you're going to swoop in and fix it for them. And that's not what we're there for. And then,
Diane, Andrea did say set clear work boundaries, not make his
mhm,
peers' problems his, rather assist him finding resources.
absolutely. And I'm also looking at some of these others. Internal, not sure problems of his own. That's an emotional and internal physical boundary. I'm not going to share this stuff, that because that's a physical act, is to share these things. To share recovery, to share stay external boundaries, to follow policies appear during work session only. Absolutely. To not give Tim rides outside session, which would be a physical external boundary. Perfect, Shannon. And healthy boundaries will actually build a more authentic rapport with the client. So external and internal boundaries. Absolutely. We need both of them. And we keep thinking, oh no, this is gonna hurt, this is gonna hurt, this is gonna hurt them. And the thing is, it doesn't. Those limits will help our peers and ourselves, and it'll help our relationship. It will also, as we help them to build up their own skills and tools and resources, to become less dependent on us, which will help them move forward in recovery even more. You guys are doing so well with this. External to follow policies and work in peer session only. Absolutely. You guys are doing so well. So, next question. So, what types or specific boundaries? So, we've covered a lot of these, but so there's time boundaries we could cover here. There's emotional boundaries that we may be doing here. There's some material boundaries, because giving a ride is not just about time, it's also about using the gas and other things like this. So there's physical boundaries. There's other types of stuff like this. And you guys have been really good at, we don't work with them outside of work time and stuff like this. So excellent. Now, scenario number 2. Peer support Sally has a peer named Jane with a physical disability that limits her mobility. Sally doesn't have a lot of physical strength, but she pushes herself to help Jane get in and out of Sally's car, as well as get Jane's wheelchair loaded into the trunk. Jane seems really thankful, so Sally knows she can't let Jane down by showing any reluctance or weakness. Sally knows Jane relies on Sally's help and feels successful when she is able to get Jane where she wants to go. So, my questions: which code of ethics are being violated in this scenario? Okay, physical, can't touch the client due to insurance and liabilities. Okay, which code of ethics is that violating right there? Whoa, whoa, whoa. Oh my goodness. The Q&A window is freaking out on me. Okay. And Mikhail brought up recovery coaches believe that every individual has strengths and the ability to learn and grow. Absolutely, and that's true with across all of the peer services. And if we just swoop in and do 4, then we're acting like we might say we think they have the ability to learn and grow, but we're not acting like it because we're doing 4 it. We're filling in. So, yeah. Working to equalize the power differential. Sally feels Jane is more powerful than her and she depends on her. Um, uh, I don't know if you mean to flip that. That Jane, because Jane is the peer, so Jane feels that Sally's more powerful and then depends on her. That may very well be the case, and that's definitely encouraged by Sally's choices. Um, so, uh, okay, I'm working through this. And Sally is working to get her personal and emotional needs met, feels successful when she's able to help Jane. Absolutely. Remember when we talk about codependence? That need to feel needed? Does that ever ring a bell with any of us in this work where, oh man, I really want to help and I don't feel like I'm helping right unless things are fixed? So I better fix it. I need to fix it. I know what it's like. And so, yeah, it's really good. So, trying to get to it's like scrolling like crazy. So, number 2, certified peer support specialists respect the rights and dignities of those they serve. This, in a lot of ways, can apply here because, in some ways, by swooping in and doing, when you see a disability, if our automatic thought is they can't, and so I gotta, that's not respectful. So when we have a disability that we can see and our instinct is to swoop in and fix it, that's not accommodating and it's not respectful because it's taking away their ability to choose and learn and grow, which we've done that. So yeah, that number 2 is cover there. We're not trained to physically help a peer and can become a liability and that could harm them by accident. Absolutely. You're gonna put your agency into hissy fits, but it also violates Code of Ethics number 15. That we remain aware of our skills and limitations and do not provide services or represent themselves as expert in areas for which they do not have sufficient knowledge or expertise. Is peer support a physical support to anyone? Is that part of our role? Nope, absolutely not. That is not our role. Even if Sally was a bodybuilder who could totally lift and throw Jane right into the car, it wouldn't matter because that's not her role. That is not what she is supposed to be doing. So it's beyond even a matter of liability into what is the appropriate role here. So that would be a violation number 15. And So we got a lot of 2 and 50. And let's see, number 6, we never intimidate, threaten, or harass those they serve. Never use undue influence, physical force, or verbal abuse. And never make unwarranted promises of benefits. I can see it possibly with the unwarranted promises of benefits. Because if it sets an expectation with Jane that she doesn't need to learn how to use her transfer board, she doesn't need to build up that strength, she doesn't need to talk to other providers, and because this is a promise of benefit that a peer supporter is going to provide, even though it's not their role, then there can be some number 6 thrown in as well. Um, uh, Rachel, are the code of ethics the same for recovery coach versus those peer support specialists? There is some overlap. The peer support specialist code of ethics is a lot shorter. The peer recovery coach code of ethics is 27 pages. The peer support is um, one. So you guys are gonna have this covers more things, but pretty much almost everything that's covered in peer support is going to be covered in the peer recovery coach. Hopefully that's helpful. And I hope you have some empathy that I decided not to do the 27-page code of ethics for this course because, yeah. So, but the peer support stuff should cover pretty much everyone. Um, so yeah, so we got a lot of good stuff going on there, and apparently I keep moving stuff around. And so what damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario? To whom and how? So, Mary, I sent you the link to the peer recovery thing earlier, and I know you were going to share it later, but if people want to, because we're not going to go over it in this course, but if you need to link to that, then you can.
I did share it earlier in the
Okay.
presentation already, but I can put it
For the
back up.
peer recovery coach or for the peer support?
But for all of them, I
Oh,
added
okay.
the peer recovery coach code of ethics, but I can put it back in right now.
Yeah. So Sinead, Mary's got that for you. Thank you.
And
And
one thing Karina said before is, I'm limited to what I can do. This should be something known from the beginning.
mm-hmm. Yep. And the thing is, when we can admit that to our peer, it's not only really good for our own recovery, but it's modeling for the peer. I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to be flawless. I don't have to worry about vulnerabilities to be enough. If you can admit that, that helps the peer right there. Does that make sense? Because a lot of times there's this, I'm not good enough because I can't do this, that, and the other. And it's like, you can still be enough. Sometimes there's workarounds, and sometimes we need resources and accommodations, but we can all of us can be enough. That's part of recovery, right? Um, so some damage possible. Making a peer dependent on their peer support, absolutely. Sally could injure herself physically. She could also injure Jane, but yeah, definitely injure herself because it already says that she doesn't have a lot of physical strength. I know that, for instance, right now I have developed pretty severe arthritis. I used to be able to put peers' wheelchairs into my vehicle. I wouldn't help them into my car because of I was set boundaries with that, but I could move their wheelchair into my vehicle, which is sometimes necessary. But I now had to set the boundary of I cannot trans work with peers that need transportation during services if they require a wheelchair because I don't have the physical capacity to do that. And it becomes an expectation for everyone. Yep, it becomes an expectation for everyone. And it can hurt Jane because it furthers helps see yourself as disabled instead of able. Oh, absolutely. How it Jane is going to see, I can't. I am defined by the I can't. And peer support is what they can about we want to say strengths focused, which is about what they can do. Are there things Jane can do? Absolutely. We don't see it here, do we? Because Sally is swooping in and just filling in all the gaps. And so that is going to hurt Jane's recovery. Absolutely. Um, excellent, excellent. You guys are doing so well.
Dyany,
Yeah.
could you turn your volume up a little bit?
Oh, yes,
There's
yes, yes. Let me get over here. Go to audio settings, and I'm going to click the button right. Oh my goodness. I do not know why it keeps. I have adjusted this with every Zoom meeting I've had for the last 2 months, and it keeps just turning it right back down. Is this better?
I think so.
Okay, we will try that. Okay, and Company's liability if damage happens. Oh, yeah. Because if Sally, who is not trained or authorized to move Jane into her vehicle, slips and drops and Jane is injured, you bet your sweet bippy that agency's getting sued. And yeah, so that's going to be a problem. So what levels of boundaries, as I keep clicking funky, there we go. What levels of boundaries would help Sally avoid the ethical violations? So that internal, external, and know you guys were kind of giving this before, but internal, external, physical, emotional, both. Yes, all of them. It covers all of them. We definitely have some physical boundaries. We've mentioned that multiple times. Don't move her into your car, right? Um, but for instance, what kind of internal boundaries, in physical or emotional, might be helpful in this scenario? Do you think it might help Sally to set an internal boundary with herself of I am going to find ways to feel satisfied with supporting Jane as she finds strength and power rather than because we got where we wanted to go because I moved her into my car? Is that an internal boundary? So there's an emotional and a physical aspect there. That makes sense? Okay. Thank you, Molly, for nodding. um, so being honest about limitations, absolutely. Quick question. If you are a LLC and you are providing a service for an organization and you happen to help Jane moving into the car, she gets injured, who is then liable, the LLC or the organization? I am not an attorney, so I really don't know the levels of liability. All I know is if you're doing stuff outside your role, you are going to have problems. And I'm not sure how that would work. You'd have to talk to an attorney about that. Emotional, learn to get satisfaction elsewhere than moving peer. Absolutely. Also, emotional, learning to not feel responsible for everything with a peer. Sometimes we see somebody, it's like they can't do it by themselves. There's no way. It's like you work with this person 2 hours a week and they've had this disability for a while. I'm pretty sure they've had this disability without you there, and in which case you are not their only resource. They've had some ways, but sometimes we feel I'm here to help, therefore I have to, and that's an internal boundary we need to set. Setting boundaries with the client before the relationship begins. Absolutely. I have worked with people that they've had so many bad boundary buddies helping them out that this is very hard for them. But every other provider did it. I'm sorry, I'm not every other provider. This is a boundary that I am going to set. And I sometimes have to repeat it and repeat it and repeat it. But one of the things I've told my peers, I'm here to find your power, help you find your power, not take it from you. Which really makes them annoyed sometimes because they're like, they want power, but they don't always recognize that that's an area where they can have power. So they're like, but because they want power, they just don't think this is an area they can have it. And I'm like, it's okay. I'm not saying you can like get up and jump into the car, but I know that there's things you can do. Self-advocating being a basic one, but there's things that you can do. And I'm not going to take that power from you. So I'm not going to swoop in because that would take the power from you. Right? Um, Understanding that your role is limited and placing boundaries that highlight the role and responsibilities. Absolutely. Definitely at the beginning of services, but I found that in many situations it helps to repeat this. And sometimes I have to do it on a regular basis, either because the peer doesn't quite want to do it or because they forget, or there's just a lot of reasons. But absolutely. So excellent. You guys are doing really well. So, what specific boundaries would be appropriate to set and enforce? we already talked about this is my role, and this is it's going to put boundaries on what I'm going to do and not do, right? In this case, it might be when I worked once with a peer that utilized a wheelchair to get around. The boundary that was worked out with my agency before I even started with her was I was allowed to stabilize her transfer board. And of course, I had to put the wheelchair in the car myself, but I could not move her and I wasn't touching her. She would sometimes grab my arm, which I would consider that part of stabilizing. But that was it. And she got mad sometimes. I'm tired today. I'm sorry. Would you like to do something else? No, I wanted to go do this thing. What other resources can you utilize for that? I don't want to use anything else. I just want you to put me in the car. I'm sorry, I cannot do that. And so she would end the session because I wasn't giving her what she wanted. But that's okay. That's not a failure on my part. That's not a failure of the system. That is choices that actually don't feel like they're giving her power, but they were. Whether or not she chooses to pick it up is another thing. Yeah, as I try to scroll through the Q&A, and I accidentally scrolled through the presentation. Okay. So create a plan from the beginning. Absolutely. And sometimes there's time boundaries involved a lot. Mostly here we see physical boundaries, but some emotional and internal boundaries as well when we get into types. So, so scenario number 3, and I'm just padding the questions up from the get-go on this one. But certified peer recovery coach Pete works with a peer named Penny who frequently flirts with Pete and sometimes gives him small gifts or treats during their appointments. Pete isn't interested in Penny and knows the gifts are cheap, so he plays along rather than make things awkward by asking her to stop. He would sometimes even joke with Penny that if she advanced far enough in her recovery and didn't need services, he might take her out sometime. What? This is like I see the eyebrows going. So what code of ethics are being violated in this scenario? 9 gifts, absolutely. 12 certified peer support specialists work to equalize the power differentials that may occur in the peer support client. Right? Oh, that's a good one. Because is it put him in a position of power to do that? Oh, you bet your sweet bippy. It's just an ethical nightmare, really. Really, really it is. It really is. 7, do not practice, condone, facilitate, or collaborate with any form of discrimination. Um, I don't know if I do number 7 on that one because I'm not sure I see discrimination. Oh, you meant 8. Okay, yeah. Oh, yeah, sexual intimate activities with colleagues. Yeah, even if he's not interested, just talking like that leads her on, and accepting these things leads her on, and absolutely, because we don't it doesn't necessarily have to have the feelings involved. Number 2, respect the rights and dignity. Yeah, this is not a respectful or dignified way to treat somebody. 10, do not enter dual relationships. Yeah, because now he's the object of her affections. And he's encouraging that whether he means to or not. Yeah, and absolutely 8, number 1, we seek to role model recovery. Yeah, he's not role modeling recovery. Why? Because I don't want to cause, I don't want to do anything. I don't want to say anything. He doesn't want to set a boundary with that. Oh, I don't want to make it awkward. Well, sometimes we have to make it awkward. And if we don't, we're not role modeling recovery well. Because recovery includes healthy boundaries. And that includes saying, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Or going to your supervisor and saying, this person seems to have a crush on me, and that's awkward. And the supervisor most likely will say, we're going to give them to another provider. And that's okay. Sometimes we hear that. Oh, I'll give them to another provider. We immediately think, oh, I screwed up. I just got fired. We can't. No. There's a lot of times that happens, and it's better for everybody. It's not about we did something wrong. Going to the supervisor and that person getting moved to somebody else is not a punishment. And 1, 2, 5, 8, 9, all of them. Sinead, okay, now, like, which one did we not cover? Five. Five, peer supports maintain high standards of personal conduct. Oh, yeah, yeah, because that is not high standards of personal conduct, right? And 12, yeah, we got the power differentials in there. Um, so yeah, we got a lot going on here. So what damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario? What kind of damage? I mean, even outside of peer situations, what kind of damage happens when somebody's like, "Oh, I don't want to," they feel this way for me, it's very obvious, and I'm just going to play along cuz this is going to make it awkward. What kind of damage does that do? Encouraging her to cease services in the hopes they might go out. Oh, yes, but yeah, if I don't do services anymore, then it means I'm ready and we can go out because you said. Oh, yeah. Emotional damage? Yes. Um fall under 6 if he's making unwarranted promises of benefits. Yeah, he could damage her trust in him and future peer support people. Absolutely. Damaging trust in people in general. Oh, in relation, I can never and trust. Maybe she might have struggles reading emotional behaviors, and in which case, oh, now I totally don't. You said this, and it didn't mean this, and so there's more than she could lose trust in herself and her ability to read things. Professional damage, absolutely. You can bet your sweet bippy if that's found out about on a professional level, that his career is going to be damaged. Recovery, damage her recovery, absolutely. um and there's just so much damage, which is why the rules are in place, right? So what levels of boundaries, internal, external, physical, emotional, would help Pete avoid the ethical violations? He's damaging himself because he's not standing up and having the courage to do the right thing. Absolutely. And that's not going to help his recovery, because sometimes we're just trying to be nice. I gotta be nice. I gotta be nice, so I don't say no, and I don't turn them down, and I don't do these things. I gotta be nice because otherwise I'm mean, and mean is bad. But in this case, mean would do less damage than the nice, because nice isn't about being kind. And external and internal. External, saying no. Internal, I am going to not feel responsible for what happens if I tell her no. I'm not going to feel like that's the worst thing. All of the boundaries. Mikhail, yes. He could tell her he's not allowed to accept gifts from any peers. Absolutely. And he could, I mean, say this has already happened, and he's like sitting there going, you know what? I made a mistake. So sometimes this happens. Sometimes we make a mistake with our boundaries. We let something slip. We slip into old habits. We're a little too nice, something like this. What do we do? And what I'll tell you right now is I have learned to be very brave at going to my peers and saying, I messed up. And this is also modeling recovery. Okay, it's like, and 9 times out of 10, the peer will say, no, you didn't do anything wrong. I asked you to do this, or I didn't see anything wrong. But I'm like, no, I was putting you in a situation, and I messed up. I had bad boundaries there. I felt bad, but I know that it's not helpful for you, for me to take that power from you, or to set these expectations that are unrealistic, or whatever I did. And I'm here to apologize, and I'm going to ask you to help me to stay on track if I ever start slipping in that area again. Because then they're like, oh, because we're handing them power on a silver platter. Because we're saying, oh, There was something else I could have got out of that besides you doing what I wanted you to do? Huh. And you are giving me responsibility to watch out for that. That makes me feel kind of powerful. So there's a lot of benefits that we got from that, even though we're also sacrificing our ego to do it. But that's good for all cases. So sometimes saying my agency won't allow this. Oh yeah, to deflect heat from confrontation. Absolutely. We're gonna have after our scenarios, we're actually going to I have some lists on ways to say no, and that is like at the top of the list. Nope. Agency says nope. Because sometimes it is hard, especially if we're practicing, if we're new at saying no. It's hard to just say no. We and it's they said no. Okay, okay, okay. I feel better now. That's okay. We work up to it sometimes. You just kindly say it, holding yourself accountable. Yep, being comfortable with uncomfortable conversations. That's part of what this is all about. If Pete is struggling with setting boundaries in place, he would need to evaluate his internal reasoning. If he cannot follow through, he would need to set Penny up with an alternative coach or peer provider. Yes, absolutely. And usually in most agencies, he doesn't do it himself. He goes to a supervisor and says, "Hey, this is a problem." And I've seen it enough times. I still remember a peer I worked with. I was with her at the agency for something or another, and she said, "Oh, that was my old counselor. I told him I had a crush on him, and then he wasn't my counselor anymore." I'm like, "Yeah." So sometimes that happens, but it's okay. Um, so we got a lot of specific boundaries we can do here. And we can sometimes do cleanup because the thing is, proactive boundaries, the boundaries we set beforehand or in the moment are excellent. But sometimes hindsight is 2020, and we're like, oh, I didn't do a good job with that. In which case, owning it is really good modeling for our peers and can be a really valuable part because it says, hey, I can be vulnerable and I can make mistakes, but that's not the end of the world. And owning them is a big part of recovery and moving forward. Excellent. Now, okay. Scenario number 4. Peer support Sally knows a woman named Barbara from church who has been struggling with symptoms of anxiety and depression. Sally shares some of her lived experience with Barbara and tells her about her role. Barbara seems encouraged by this, and a couple of weeks later, Sally is surprised when her supervisor gives Barbara to her as a new peer. Sally needed another peer, and she needed more time on her workload, and feels like she might have somehow led Barbara to seek Sally out as a provider, so she feels obligated to help her and accepts the assignment. So, which code of ethics are being violated by this scenario? Dual relationship, absolutely. Number 10. Got a dual relationship, even though the other one existed first, still a dual relationship, right? Um, so what damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario? So if the people at church in general know that you are a peer provider and and then they find out that there's something between you and Barbara, between Sally and Barbara in this case, could that be a confidentiality issue? Yep. So we got that bit of an issue. What other things can we do? Damage can be happen here. Emotional trust. Yep. And it could go a little bit either way because it's like, now things are awkward and I don't know what I can share and what I Can't share and what yeah, messy, right? How do you navigate dual relationships in small communities? That is a very good question. So, one of the things we got to remember is the scope, the three scopes of staying in our lane, which we have the scope of competence is what we're trained for, the scope of practice is what we're hired for, and the scope of current role is what we are scheduled to do in that moment. And those three all cover the staying in our lane. So, for instance, in a small community, you might be peer support and recovery coach and case management and CBRS. And if there's nobody else providing some of these services, you might be asked to do more than one thing for one person. Most of the time, agencies are going to work very hard to avoid giving multiple roles, giving you as a provider in multiple roles to the same person. But sometimes in small communities, that's very hard. And we also have the extra um, sticky situation of there's 47 people in my town. I serve 5 of them. There's no way I can't run into them outside, right? In which case we follow some of the HIPAA rules of, for instance, in public, I don't greet them till they greet first. And there's a lot of informed consent of this is what this looks like. These are going to be some of the expectations in public. And if we have, and sometimes it involves referring people in another town if possible. In Idaho, that can be hard because not only are some towns very small, but the next town might be 50 miles away. And so there are different challenges we will run into there. Definitely talk to your supervisor, definitely talk to your agency about this because if we can avoid the situation altogether, that's the best. Otherwise, there's a lot of talking over with the person and saying, look, here's the limitations and this is what needs to be limited if I'm to offer you services and give services for you. Does that make sense? And there may want to be some talk with an attorney and but definitely supervisors and agency heads and other things like this because you're right, it's sticky. It's boundaries, 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 Gabriella. Absolutely. They might not be receptive to feedback or professional setting. Yeah, Rochelle brought us back to topic here. So yeah, some of the damage is she knows you from church. She's heard things from you in church, or there's this, that, and the other, and now you're trying to set out professional boundaries. She might not be receptive to that. What? You're setting all these boundaries now, and you're trying to do all this stuff, and you're asking so many open-ended questions. Why? And that might make things awkward moving forward. Might damage your why your relationship in church and other things, I guess. And then that could possibly have negative repercussions if she goes to other people and say, I was working with them and things got all weird. Man, now I don't like that person. And the other people are like, oh, I didn't know they were like that. And they don't even recognize some of the professional things that we do, which I look at and I'm like, well, this feels very normal to use open-ended questions all the time. But sometimes people don't like that, right? So yeah, there's a lot of things there. Um, yeah, so Brianna and Cynthia, yeah, doing ACT, oh yeah. So yeah, boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. There's a lot of things there. Yeah, I personally hate when I run into family members out in the community because they're like, "Oh, we can talk, talk, talk," and I'm like, "No, yeah, talk, talk, talk. I gotta talk to you later," and they'll like follow me around. I'm not kidding, and I'm like, "Go away, go, go." I don't even want to say that I'm working because that gives away confidentiality. So yeah, you got small communities are fun. So what levels, internal, external, emotional, physical, of boundaries would help Sally avoid the ethical violations? Pressures of expectations that the clients have created in their minds. That is an internal boundary, internal emotion. I feel responsible for their expectations, which I'm partially imagining and filling in the blanks on, right? So that's an internal boundary, that emotional boundary. I'm not going to feel the pressure, uh, which we can't always control our emotions that well, but I'm not going to let myself act on the pressure that I feel. And I find for myself, if I can, I'm not going to act on that feeling of pressure, and then that helps, and then I say no, and then I act on that, then that usually helps me release some of the emotional feeling of, oh, but I have to. Wait, no, remember how I didn't do it and I set boundaries in this time and it actually worked out better? Oh, yeah. And then I can let go of it a little bit better. I have to work that way through. I advise everybody, tell her company she knows her from church. Definitely. That's the first thing. It's like, I mean, even if they sign it and then she's like, oh, I shouldn't do this, then go to your supervisor. That's part of the thing with responsibility is sometimes we make mistakes. But that doesn't mean we're like, oh, I made it. I made my bed now. I have to sleep in it. No, we like going to the supervisor. I know I accepted them, but I know them from church. And the supervisor's like, oh, well, thank you for telling me. You know that's not okay. Yeah, I know. That's why I came. But we can do that, right? And external physical, don't accept the peer as a client. Yep. And it usually involves the last one. Tell their company she knows her from church. Yep. She could refer to somebody else. That is a possibility. But the vast majority of the time in peer services, that is something you talk to your supervisor about, and the supervisor deals with it. If you are the supervisor, then yes, then you refer to somebody else. Be transparent with supervisor and assign. Yep, get and the supervisor should assign another peer support worker. Absolutely. And so we've got a lot of specific boundaries going on there. And we can also, if we talk to the supervisor and say, I know her from church, and the supervisor says, oh, okay, I'll assign her to somebody else. That person might be a little bit hurt. Well, you told me about this and I wanted to work with you. And then we can talk to that person and say, I know that I talked about it and I think it's a great service and I really like this. And I might even tell her, this person you're working with is, top notch or whatever. But I'm not going to say, it's called a dual relationship and it would violate the code of ethics. But I don't want it to make our relationship weird. And so if if you think, I still think that there's some benefits that can be had from this service, but I understand if that's disappointing. But ethically and just for everybody, it's going to be better that I don't work with you directly. And hopefully, Barbara will understand that and accept it. And because a lot of times with boundaries, people aren't going to say, oh, okay. They're going to be like, no, but that's okay because it doesn't mean it's not better for them right that way. Um, so another scenario. So certified family peer support. Jenny is supporting a family from Mexico. She finds some of their customs uncomfortable and questions if some of the religious and cultural traditions may be contributing to some of the barriers the child with a diagnosis of severe emotional disorder is experiencing. Discussing some of her theories with some of her friends on social media. She changes the names for privacy, but includes details of diagnoses and conditions. What code of ethics are being violated in this scenario? Seven, 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 seven. Do not practice, condone, or facilitate, collaborate with any form of discrimination. Absolutely. One of the things about culture is each individual is the expert on their own culture. Has she talked with the family? Is there evidence that she's talked with the family about the things that are making her uncomfortable? No, there's no evidence of that. And I'm gonna say, as since I wrote the scenario, that she hasn't. She's just like, this is weird. I'm gonna talk to other people about it. And and so yeah, there's some discrimination going on, absolutely, absolutely. And confidentiality, absolutely. Uh there's, even if they don't share PHI, which is personal health information, which is more identifiable, there is a potential of confidentiality that goes on, because I have to say that I have seen scenarios when a person totally avoids using the name or too many specifics, but the things that they say are unique enough that somebody says, "Are you talking about this person?" And then the original person's like, "Oh no." Because we have to be really careful with that sort of stuff. 16, do not hold a clinical role and do not offer primary treatment for mental health issues, prescribe medicine, act as legal representative, or provide legal advice, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We don't do other things. And there may be a little bit of that going on. They're not offering that to the peer, definitely, but they are working outside of their lane, and that I think that this is causing that. And that is not a family support person's, or this is contributing to these things. That's not our role. As a support provider, we're supporting people with different things. We're not diagnosing. So yeah, I would put 16 there. Three, yeah, with confidentiality, and two, respecting the rights and dignity of those they serve. Absolutely. When we are discriminating, that's definitely not respectful, right? So what kind of damage is possible from the ethical violations in this scenario? Emotional, mental, conversational. Emotional damage, yeah. Mental damage, possibly. I mean, it could feed her bias seeking. I mean, honestly, is social media ever the best place to get advice on anything? I mean, especially when it comes to mental health, it generally is not. And so, yeah, it can skew her bias in one way or another. Conversational can make things awkward. HIPAA compliance, legal liability. I'm not so sure about legal liability except when it comes to confidentiality. And HIPAA possibly. I mean, I could just see a scenario where the family comes and says, "My friend," and you find out then that the friend they're talking about is a friend of yours that you were discussing this with on social media. She says that she's friend with you on social media, and she said blah blah blah. Were you talking about me? And then you're like, "Oh no." We don't want that, do we ever? Because sometimes yeah, sometimes these things are, Idaho is small and there's more connections than you think. And so we really have to be careful with stuff like that. So, and then it gets into HIPAA. Loss of trust in helping professionals. Absolutely. If the family finds out what she's doing, emotional damage. Absolutely. Nobody, because a lot of times these people are already in a vulnerable position. And this is, you were supposed to be somebody who was supposed to keep their confidence and their trust, and you find out you're talking about them like that. They find out that you have biases and discriminating. Oh my goodness, the trust is just shattered. And that can overall hurt the recovery, because they might, I don't want to work with your agency anymore. I don't want to work with you anymore. I don't want to work with professionals anymore. We're just gonna do stuff because I can't trust anybody anymore. And hopefully it doesn't. The repercussions aren't that extreme, but they can be. So absolutely. So there's a lot of things. So what levels of boundaries would help avoid the ethical violations and the damage thereof? Internal, external, physical, emotional. Yeah, I have a peer that I worked with in Pocatello and Twin Falls, and I later worked with. Boy, they just follow them around, or they follow you around. Yeah, it happens. External boundaries. So, what are some of the external boundaries that can be set here? Oh, they follow you. Oh, internal physical, not sharing on social media. Absolutely. And one of the things I advise everybody is all your social media accounts need to be locked down. Because if they're public, your posts or your stuff are locked down at all, then peers can see them whether they're friends with you or not, and you don't want that. Bonus, you don't get the people spoofing your account so easily if you lock them down. Um, Self awareness internal and maintain all external proper use of social media and sharing about peers outside of what is absolutely necessary. Yeah, and sharing about our peers on social media is never necessary. Never. Yeah. Internal, recognize your bias, seek to reassign if unable to move past. Absolutely. Because the thing is, everybody has biases. It's not a set in stone thing. We can all look at that um, uh, and take opportunities to adjust those things and to learn more and work on that. And but if it's taking a while or if we just don't want to, talk to your supervisor. What do we got? Um, yeah, we got a lot of different things there. So some specific boundaries. We mentioned if you don't share on social media. If you're working with through this stuff, we all have supervision. We and most of us have staffing. That's the good way that a lot of this system works. Those are designed for situations like that, especially staffing. Or there's collaboration. Collaborate with the counselors involved and say, "I'm not sure about this," and then the counsel. And but most of the time, if we're sharing on social media instead of our with supervision or staffing, then we have some trust issues or we're afraid of getting in trouble, in which case we know that what we're doing is maybe not the best thing to be doing anyway, right? We need to evaluate some of what we're doing and why we're doing it. I do recommend we all stay in counseling if we can afford it. I know it's not always easy. So um, so those are the scenarios I wanted to open sometime because usually when it comes to boundaries, we've all experienced some things we're like, right? Especially if we've been doing this for a while. So, what I'm going to give you a few minutes to do is to bring up questions in the Q&A about what about this sort of situation? What about that sort of situation? So that and give you opportunities to get some perspective and maybe get some. It's like this happened before, or I'm facing this. A lot of times it's stuff in the past. It's like, what do I do, or what should I have done, or what was the best thing? In which case, we can open it up to discussion, or I can just say, this is what I've learned in my 9 years. Oh, I do see something else from Shannon. External investing cultural competency training. Yes, that is an excellent CEU to seek out, and you get a CEU out of it too. Is different things with cultural humility and cultural sensitivity and cultural competency. Yes, but opening it up for questions and scenarios. Could be something you've heard at work. Oh, I heard about this. What would be the best thing to do? No PHI, nothing specific. If a provider, blah, blah, blah. Usually I get some of these I usually don't set aside time, but then people are like, but what if I have these questions? And so I'm giving you time for questions.
While
Mary?
people are working on that, Diane, I did notice that Craig Larson put in a comment in Q&A. they follow me, and I'm
Oh, that
assuming
was because of his earlier comment about working with the same person in Pokey and Twin and Boise and Caldwell. So that's what he was talking about. At least, yeah. What do I do if my supervisor is doing unethical things? If your supervisor is the owner in the agency, it would depend on if the owner of the agency is uh how much you trust the owner of the agency, because that may be something to take to the owner of the agency. But it can also be something that you bring before the there's some ombudsmans and there's some state regulatory that they don't usually come in and look at things, but you can bring things to them. Um, I have seen, well, mostly a total of once, I've seen a peer bring charges against a peer provider. They were unfounded, but it went through a whole investigation, and that is the kind of thing that can happen. Now, it's so I do recommend something like that. I'm not sure how anonymous it can be, um, but I would start in agency first, and if that does not address it, then I would go to either DHW. DHW is probably the best to address things like that, because it's their ethics that are being violated. So things like that. That is that's a hard situation, and I'm really sorry if that's happening. That's a hard situation, and I might try to look for another agency. There's always people looking for peer providers. Um, my recovery coach supervisor does not work at the same agency as I do, and I also have an internal supervisor for internal issues. That that kind of makes sense, especially with smaller agencies. As long as there's full ROIs in place, that can get kind of tricky, because usually when a person starts work at an agency, then there's blanket ROI with an intake paperwork that covers everybody that works at an agency. But you need to talk about things with your supervisor, and they're external to the agency, in which case you need to make sure that confidentiality documentation is in place. Otherwise, Craig, that's a good thing to that's a good thing to bring up. What else we got? Sorry for my really slow stimming. Just kind of creaking. What do we got? So has anybody been in a situation where you are very proud of the boundaries that you were able to set and enforce, and have some outcome you want to share? Okay, excellent. We're getting some stuff. I live in a small community, and I'm both peer support and a recovery coach, and I've been in the recovery community for years. So most of the peers I see, I know on some level. How do I handle that? As there's not many peer. I assume you mean peer providers available here. That again gets tricky. I don't know how many other communities are kind of close by. And the thing is, you can't unknow the people you already know. So even if you do some other things to try to limit that, you're gonna know people. And so one I always recommend people talk to their supervisor and or their agency, but I also uh I talk to the people that I work with. I'm like, if I run into you outside of work, even if we don't work together anymore, you can wave at me and I will wave back. I will never wave first. That's a HIPAA rule. And other than that, is going to limit some things. And that, in a small community, that can limit some socialization, but unfortunately that can be necessary, because I can't imagine the stickiness of trying to socialize even a year or two after no longer working with a person. So that is something to, sometimes if people say, I need this service, and you're like, oh, I'm the only person in town that gives that service, it's like looking at, knowing and having a list of anybody in the remote region that you could possibly refer this person to, can be very helpful. Okay. Craig says he's also a recovery coach supervisor. I do not discuss HIPAA issues with my recovery coach supervisor. That makes sense. And I mean, no PHI. And I am not sure exactly the differences between a peer support supervisor and a recovery coach supervisor. A peer support supervisor is generally there to support the peer on a fairly close basis, and there's a lot of interaction that goes on. And so it sounds like it's more in depth, in which case with yours, it sounds like it could be looser. Mikhail, a peer and an individual often attending the same 12-step meetings due to living in a small community. This is something that comes up a lot, and it can be very hard. And considering that AA stands for Alcoholics Anonymous, and if you're both there and you work together, not only is that a potential dual relationship, but it's no longer anonymous, in which case I can have layers of difficulty for both you and your peer. Luckily, these days there are online options of of recovery groups. I know that they aren't always hit the same, but finding different times or anything, even if there's some driving, can sometimes be very helpful. That's a very sticky, difficult situation. Um, Somebody just did a motorcycle show in the prison this last weekend, ran to several people that I had previously worked with. I can see that sort of thing. One of the things that I found helpful, even though it doesn't always seem relevant in the moment, is when I very first start working with a peer, letting them know some of the privacy rules outside of work almost immediately. Not just when I'm working with them, but if, like, no contact for at least 2 years afterwards. I've had peers like, I could, if I don't work with you anymore, then we could be friends, right? And I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't have any contact with you for at least 2 years. And that's going to vary because that's not lined out in our code of ethics. But a lot of times, 2 years is, I think, the social work limit. And so that's what a lot of agencies use. So I use it as a rule of thumb. But like, I can say hi if you say hi first, and if you previously worked with them, especially if it's been a few years, saying hi. But I am very closed off with a lot of that stuff. Um, Catherine, I have said no to purchasing things for peers, and it has empowered them to acquire things they want for themselves. Excellent. It's also usually empowers for budgeting. It empowers for self-advocacy. It empowers for giving them power, because it's like, oh, but they can't. No, oh, but they can if you build up these skills and tools and resources, right? And that you just gave them power. So Catherine, yes, way to go. And sometimes just like, oh, it's just really cheap, it's just really small, oh, they're just short $1, but that still gives them power. And having the rules absolute reduces confusion. Excellent, excellent. So anybody else have anything? Okay. Some tips on saying no effectively. This is really helpful, especially when it's just, sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's something we need to practice. One of the my mottos with peer support is we do not yell at babies or toddlers. And that's actually my motto with a lot of things. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of things in our lives that we're new at. We're relatively new at. And it might, and we could sometimes, but I should know this by now, but these other people know this already. Everybody seems to know this. Irrelevant. Comparison is the thief of joy. We don't, we, if we're new at something, we're not going to be the best at it most of the time. It's going to take practice. It might take some unlearning. So we don't get mad at ourselves. We set that internal boundary. I might be trying some new things. And some of these are steps that you can utilize as you practice ways to say no. Because sometimes that compulsion to, oh, I got to fix it is so powerful. But these are good tools. Number one, this was brought up earlier, blame the company, blame agency rules, blame the code of ethics, whatever. If blame your supervisor. If the peer pushes, a reminder that the rules are to protect everyone can be helpful. One of the biggest things I hear is they want no nobody will know. I know. That's my immediate response. I know. And they can know, and you'd be surprised what I've seen. So blame the company, blame your supervisor, blame your code of ethics, and stick to that. You can blame your limits. This is not part of my role, or that's beyond my capacity at this time work well. We don't need to give detailed whys. Sometimes we feel like we have to make excuses. We feel bad about it, and that comes out in how we ramble about, oh, I really shouldn't do that because of this, that, and the other, and it's really hard, and I am really sorry, and we get doing that, and you know what the peer sees if they and hear if they are used to doing things that way, they hear that an opening, they hear weakness that they can get around. Oh, you feel bad about saying no. I know if I push, I can get you to say yes. Not all peers will do that, but those that utilize that maladaptive coping skill will hear that, because that's where why emotional boundaries back up the physical boundaries. So blaming, being able to admit to a weakness, it's like I can't do that at this point. And if they say why, sometimes I might say my arthritis. I'm just like it's not within my capacity at this time. But I know what other resources do you have that can help you with that? What other tools do you have that might be able to help you get that done? And putting the questions back that give them back the power that they have, even if they can't do it directly themselves, there's still power that they have. Protect their power. That moves right into this one. I am here to support you as you find your power, not take it from you. If I did that for you, it would take it from you. One of the analogies I use a lot is the analogy of the gym. You go to the gym and you got to do hard things because hard things are the point, because hard things are how we grow. If somebody else does the work for you because it's too hard, are you going to grow? No. And they're not probably going to get any better either. Because, so this is something that I sometimes will take, when peers like, no, but I can't, but I can't, but I can't. It's like, well, you still, me doing it for you doesn't help you move closer to that. There's other more appropriate ways to do that. And I'm not going to take that power from you. I'm not going to take that opportunity from you. I won't do it. So we can then remind them of their strengths and the power that comes from trying. And at this point, I usually tell people you take Yoda and you throw them out the window, because there is a lot of trying. There is a lot of practice. Practice makes progress. Not perfect. I don't like that saying. Practice makes progress. And then we can, even if it's not doing the thing directly. When I talk about skills and tools and resources, skills are abilities that can grow through trying and figure things out, and tools are items that we use to help us get closer to our goals, and resources are services or supports or systems that help us in different ways. And so a lot of times we'll have a barrier or multiple barriers, in which case building skills, like with my ADHD, I have a heck of a lot of time blindness and time optimism. And so I've had to build up skills through a lot of trial and error and other things to be like, hey, what can I do to help me to be to things on time and help me things and with different things like this. So building up skills such as utilizing different calendar tools and timers and other things like this. And so then those tools I'll use different sound notifications. I'll use different things on my phone. And I get fairly strict about it because I know that that is the only way to accommodate my own. But these are things that I have been able to do. Now, if I am don't have power, if I abdicate my power, I'm gonna say, remind me to people to do this, remind me to do this, call me to do this. And then I'll give excuses all the time when I fail and fail and fail and I don't show up. But when I take my power, I build up the skills and the tools, and sometimes there's resources as well. But most of the time, with that particular barrier, it's skills and tools. But when I remind the peers of their strengths and the power that comes from trying, then a lot of times that can be very helpful. It's like, I have seen you're pretty good with your phone. What? So what is there anything that you could do with your phone? What could you do with your phone that might be able to help you with this? What? Oh, I've noticed that you're really good at talking to people, or I've noticed that remind them of their strengths. Is there any way that you can utilize that or build on that to get closer to what you want? And I usually don't say to get what you want, but to get closer to what you want. Because like you say to get what you want, oh, there's still all these barriers. But if it's closer, then we're better. And better is better. And then we refer to the recovery plan. How does this fit with the goals that you set? I found that to be really useful, especially sometimes I've worked with peers who their recovery goals, they've set them, but they reflect a lot of shoulds that they feel from other people. Oh, I should be losing weight. I should be getting out. And so they hate them. They don't really want them. They're not really their goals. But they don't feel comfortable setting their own goals yet. And so sometimes in setting boundaries, because I've worked with peers that, they have these goals that they don't want to work on. They just want to go out to eat every week. And part of that is pushing against rules, for instance, in rehab. In which case I'll be like, how does this fit with your goals? Now I can usually see a way it can fit with the goals, reducing isolation or doing some other things. But if they're like, oh, it doesn't, okay, what would you like to do if it fits with your goals? Because technically that's what we are supposed to do anyway. It needs to be reflected in our documentation. But also that helps the peer to figure out how to make things work within their goals, right? Want to recognize and honor their feelings. This is something that a lot of times when we set boundaries, we feel bad because we see that the reason behind them up here asking for something. But we can recognize and honor their feelings without having to give in, and that is helpful to both them and to us. And that can look like, I know that this is important to you. How else do you feel you can get this done? Well, I need to get it done right now. Okay, I can see that, and I understand that frustration. I still cannot do that. And what else how else can I support you? Um, I can support you if you want to look into a more appropriate resource to help you with that. Oh, you can support me with that? I can support you with that. I can't do the thing for you, but I can support you while you find a more appropriate solution. And then, and recognizing their feelings. It's not that we don't like them. It's not that we're setting these boundaries for their benefit as well as ours. And I gave a spoiler to the last one, offered to support them in finding more appropriate solutions. That's a big one. It's not like I'm saying no to be mean or because you can't have that thing. I'm saying no for you, and this gives them the opportunity to self-advocate. What other resources do you have? What other tools and skills do you have that can help you get closer to that? I don't know. I don't know. Well, how can I support you in figuring out? And being supportive and all that stuff. And want to remember that saying no helps a peer build skills and resilience. They learn how to deal with stressors better because when you recognize, oh, I'm not stuck because nobody's giving me the answer, I have possibilities too. That's going to help their resilience and their ability to deal with hard things. Some less effective ways to say no, and sometimes we fall back on this. I don't know that I mean, honestly, I am not even a manipulator, but I have had that used against me so many times, sometimes from siblings. The when I hear, I don't know, I see opportunity. You really want to give in, and if I push a little harder, I can give in. So I don't recommend. That is not necessarily a good way to say no. Another thing is change the subject. How's your family doing? And what about this other thing and the other? If we change the subject, sometimes that works with some peers, but it can damage trust over time. Um, Delays such as the weather isn't good for that today, or we don't have time for that today. Um, that tells them, oh, when the weather is different, we can do it. When we have more time, we can do it. And if the answer is no, no, then the answer needs to be no, and not something that's going to give them hope or a reason to think that they can do it later. Those methods may work temporarily, but they are less honest and just kick the can down the road. We want to avoid these when possible. It can be really hard, and one of the things I hate with these is if I use them even accidentally and then they bring it back and I'm like, oh man. Because then I have to apologize and give a harder no. And I know that I'm not only giving a no, I get to give a no with the, oh, you've had hope for this for the last week. And I just dashed all of that. And that's even worse than just saying no in the first place. I remind myself of that and it makes it easier to say, give a more firm no in the first place. Does that make sense? Um, Anastasia, it's never okay to give peers any money. I don't know what I said that might have led you to believe that. It's never okay to give peers money. I'm looking at you different. Validate their emotional expression while also communicate the boundary. Absolutely. One of the most fun things I see with some clients is when they are surprised that they can do what they thought they couldn't, like using their electronic devices to access their resources on their own. Yeah, that's one of the things that some other providers, because of different roles, and a lot of times people, especially if they've had lifelong disabilities, they don't feel they have any power in their life. They don't feel they have any voice. And one of the greatest and most wonderful things about being a peer support is supporting a person while they find their own power and recognize they can do things. That opens worlds to them. That is an amazing thing, Jacqueline. That oh hey Jackie, that's an amazing thing. Changing the subject can cause feelings of invalidation. Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, uh, and absolutely, it's dismissing the subject, and it can be very rude. Um, so, some other tips: we want to avoid letting your peer's goal become your goal. Your goal is to support your peer in working towards their goal, not supporting the goal. Does that make sense? You never are there to support the goal. You are there to support the peer reaching towards the goal. If you were a person at the gym, you support the people while they work towards their goal. You never do any of it for them. The goal isn't to get the weights lifted. The goal is the strength that comes from lifting. And the goal with peer support is never to get the goals done. It is to support the peers while they build the strength as they work on those things. Does that make sense? Taking their goal on ourselves can make it harder to keep boundaries that allow the peer to gain skills and resources to move into recovery. And it's just we don't want to do, and that seems like, oh, but their goals. Yeah, their goals are their goals. Theirs, not ours. We are there for the peer, not for the goals. Are you seeing the peer's barriers and limitations or their strengths? If you're looking for ways to help and fix things, then you are not strengths focused. Focus on what the peer can do, even if it currently seems small. Find hope in that. Support that. Your hope and focus can help your peer feel more capable and safer as they move in a positive direction. Yeah, Catherine, I do the exact same thing. I start an appointment by asking which goals they would like to work on, and I've adjust that slightly over the years to be which goals would you like to work towards, because sometimes that feels a little less intimidating for some reason. But yeah, absolutely. Good boundaries focus on what is, not on what should be. Should is this la la land of pressure. If we allow our perception to be tainted by what we think a body or peer or family or system or ourselves should be doing, we will either become frustrated or trying to fill in missing gaps by letting boundaries slip. Does that make sense? Um, you guys have been great. Do we have any questions before we before I accidentally hit the I do not know what I hit that time. There we go. And turn that off. So, do we have any questions before we end this class? How would you handle a client that's very dismissive when feedback is given by a provider? So, one of the things that we avoid in keeping our boundaries, we stay off the sofa. Suggestions, opinions, feedback, or advice. So, a lot of times, if we're giving feedback, suggestions, opinions, advice, we're trying to guide or push, and that is absolutely not our role. We are not skills developers or anything. So, first thing I would do is push back, is pull back on offering feedback, because a lot of times, and I would use more open-ended questions. What do you feel that would be? What, sometimes they're like, well, what about this? Well, what would that mean to you? What would that look like for you? More open-ended questions. Sometimes people get mad when you do questions, but the thing is, I can't tell you what's going to work. I can't show you what's going to work. I am here to support you while you figure that out. But what if I fail? Then I will still be here and it's okay. Feeling safe when they try is very valuable. So the first thing I would do with that one is not give feedback anymore, and practice open-ended questions. Um, and if it's for their goals, or it doesn't matter. I'm going to practice more open-ended questions and giving that over to them. Not only how they do it, but how they feel about it, and how they did that work for you? Did you like that? And what did you, is there, if there was anything about that you'd like to be different, what would it be? And how could you get that? And then how can I support you with that? So I back off from the feedback, even if they ask. Just kind of turn it around. I hope that helps. Anything else? So you guys, it's something, these are not, I will say after teaching this for years, it's not natural things for most of us, because most of us want to help, they want to fix, we want to save. But these are things that as we practice them and we see the light of power start to, I can do something here, I can do this. You're going to stick with me even if I mess up, even if I fail, even if this isn't the right way right away? Absolutely. It's incredibly powerful in our peers' lives and in our own as well. So thank you very much, and for this class. You guys have been a great audience.
Thanks so much, Dyany. You rocked it. And thank all of you for your great participation. I have put the survey link in the chat, and I will send an email in the next hour or so with not only the survey link, but all of the links from this session. Reminder, your confirmation or reminder email has all of the CEU requirements, and you've got 2 days to finish that survey. Um, so I think it's till 2 o'clock on Thursday. That's when it closes. If you have any questions, direct them to the Empower Idaho email. I think Eden will put it in the chat, and the slides and recording will be available on the website in a few days. Thank you all for attending, and really, this was a great session. And have a great rest of your day, everybody. Thanks again, Dyany. Bye, everyone.